VK3 Alpha Mike Lima will have a half an hour's worth of fill material until the scheduled crossband on 439.225. And this week, a slightly grim presentation. I'll try to put you in the frame of mind of people who are facing the start of the Second World War. I've got 3 items to play up to 11 o'clock. The BBC News item from the 2nd of September 1939, the corresponding Nazi transmission of news on the 2nd of September 1939, in English, the broadcast for the British Isles, and finally the declaration of war on the 3rd of September 1939. And please note how both sides, particularly the Nazis, took no responsibility whatever for being the aggressors in that war, although clearly it was Hitler invading country after country, the Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, finally Poland, and that triggered the Second World War. So first of all, the British broadcast of news, 2nd of September 1939, Alvar Liddell, the announcer, and this is Britain right on the brink of war, with the last negotiations apparently having failed. Over to the BBC, 2nd of September 1939.
In the French Chamber of Deputies this afternoon, Monsieur Daladier reviewed the history of the last-minute diplomatic attempts to avert hostilities. He began by paying a tribute to the efforts of the Italian government and went on to say that Poland was assured of help from the nations of free men. For several days, went on Monsieur Daladier, peace has been menaced by the arbitrary demands of Germany. All peaceful means were utilized in order to save the peace of the world. Germany has reduced them to nothing. Monsieur Daladier said that France and Britain would not stand by at the destruction of friendly people. It was not a question of German-Polish conflict, he said, but of a new attempt to dominate Europe. Monsieur Daladier recalled the fate of Austria and Czechoslovakia and said that with Herr Hitler it was deeds and not words that counted. France had always emphasized that she would fulfill her pledges towards Poland in the case of aggression, and Poland had suffered the most unjust and brutal aggression. A France which would allow such aggression to be carried out would soon be discredited and exposed to the most formidable of onslaughts. Monsieur Daladier then recalled the joint démarche made by the British and French ambassadors in Berlin and repeated that France would unhesitatingly fulfill her obligations unless the attack on Poland stopped. President Lebrun has sent a message to the French Senate and Chamber. He says that war has broken out because the two nations had differences which could have been settled by free and loyal negotiations. But at the moment when their plenipotentiaries were about to meet, Germany attacked Poland. Great Britain and France, says President Lebrun, have done everything humanly possible to avert this crisis. The evacuation of civilians in Paris is going on steadily, and special trains have been leaving for the country all today. The French cabinet met at 7:30 tonight under the presidency of Monsieur Daladier. Before the meeting, Monsieur Daladier had a talk with the Foreign Minister, Monsieur Bonnet, and the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, General Gamler. This is London Calling in the Overseas Service of the BBC. And now we continue the news summary. According to an official Polish telegram, Warsaw has been bombed 6 times today. The telegram adds that fighting of a most serious nature continues on the whole length of the front. An official German communique issued at midday claims that German troops advanced at all points early this morning. It was claimed that the Yalunka Pass, which is 40 miles south of Krakow, was forced and aeroplanes destroyed on Polish aerodromes. The Warsaw radio station claimed at midday that about 100 German tanks had been put out of action near Falun, 50 miles southwest of Lodz, and that 34 German aeroplanes have been brought down. Another report received via Paris speaks of 16 German tanks being disabled and 500 prisoners taken. Herr Hitler today replied to President Roosevelt's appeal about the bombing of civilians and said he had already given his aircraft orders to bomb only military objectives. The German news agency has protested against allegations that the Germans have been using gas and incendiary bombs. Martial law has been proclaimed in Poland and evacuation measures are being taken in Warsaw. The Slovak minister in Warsaw has protested against the invasion of Slovakia by Germany, according to the official Polish news agency, and its use as a war base against Poland. Here in London, Mr. Chamberlain called a meeting of the Cabinet at number 10 Downing Street, and the Polish ambassador was present. It is reported that the British Cabinet has already been widened and that 4 new ministers will be appointed. But it was learned definitely this afternoon that the Labour Party has decided not to be represented in the government, though it will give it its full support. The House of Commons today gave a second reading to 2 bills. One is the National Service Bill, which will make all men between 18 and 41 subject to military service. The Secretary for War explained that it did not follow that the government would begin by conscripting men at the age of 18. Everything, he said, depended on how long a struggle might last. The other bill provides for grants to be paid in respect of injury or death caused among civilians by air raids or other war operations. The King and Queen have decided to stay at Buckingham Palace for the time being. This afternoon, the Queen drove from the palace to visit the Westminster ARP headquarters. The Ministry of Supply has made orders for the control of essential materials such as iron and steel, other metals, wool, flax, and paper. The Ministry of Agriculture has arranged to supply the needs of farmers for tractors, fertilizers, and other necessaries. In most cases, it is stated, the government have already accumulated reserves. It is thought that there are ample supplies of seeds for future requirements. The evacuation of London and other large towns continued today, and reports from all over the country show that the scheme is working smoothly. Parents will be informed on Monday of the exact addresses to which their children have been taken. Members of the Metropolitan Police War Reserve who have been called up reported for duty today. There is now a reserve of nearly 20,000 men for police duties. The Portuguese government announced today that Portugal meant to remain neutral. An official manifesto declared that grave consequences might be expected from the war among the peoples of the whole world. Happily, it continues, our obligations in alliance with England, which we wish to confirm on this grave occasion, do not impose on us the necessity of abandoning our position of neutrality. The Hungarian government is withholding any declaration of neutrality, as it does not recognize that a state of war exists. The Egyptian government is imposing a telephonic, telegraphic, postal, and internal censorship. Here is today's news from the Empire. The Canadian Prime Minister has sent a loyal message to Mr. Chamberlain, telling him that the government of Canada will seek parliamentary authority to cooperate at the side of Britain. Mr. Chamberlain has replied that the British government are greatly encouraged to know that Canada is at one with them in resisting aggression. The South African Parliament had a special session today, and General Herzog announced that he would soon make a statement on the government's attitude towards war. General Smuts introduced an emergency bill in the Senate to allow the new Senate to be constituted while the old one still existed. In Australia, the Federal Cabinet has declared that the danger of war exists. This means that power has been given to take action preparatory to proclaiming that a state of war exists when the full emergency plans would come into operation. The acting Prime Minister of New Zealand has promised full cooperation with this country. In India, the Viceroy has invited Mr. Gandhi and other political leaders to discuss the situation. 18 more Indian princes have sent assurances of loyalty to the King and offers of support. Here is a later report from the House of Commons. The Prime Minister made a short reply to Mr. Greenwood's speech. He said he shared the disgust expressed by the House at manoeuvres of the kind that were going on. The government, he added, was in a somewhat difficult position since it was difficult to synchronize action with allies by telephone. He said he felt certain he would be able to make a statement tomorrow. The House adjourned till midday tomorrow.
And here is the Berlin side of the story. The Berlin News Service of the Nazi Party, 2nd of November 1939. Interesting how innocent it all sounds.
It is entirely up to the decisions of Britain and France if peace is to prevail in Europe or not. This is the tenor of commentaries published by the German press in its editions on Saturday evening. Britain only will be responsible, the Hamburger Fremdenblatt, for instance, declares, if the present crisis is to develop into a general conflict. The paper emphatically denies the theory which holds that Germany is the aggressor in the present conflict with Poland. Mr. Chamberlain, the paper continues to say, prefers to view the advance of the German troops as an aggressive action which menaces the independence of Poland. But such arguments can be set forth only if he actually intends to set the Anglo-Polish Pact into operation. For the sake of history, however, the fact must be nailed down that the numerous border incidents in Silesia and East Prussia, and especially the Polish bombardment of Beuthen, created a situation which made it incompatible with the honor of a great power to let that series of military transgressions go by unpunished. Germany's action is an act of defense. Reports spread by the English News Service Exchange Telegraph and by the broadcasting station of Poland are being emphatically denied by Berlin. These reports asserted that German airplanes had dropped gas and incendiary bombs in the vicinity of Posen. The German official news agency, Deutsches Nachrichtenbüro, has been empowered to make the following statement. In the wake of false political reports with a tendency to cause alarm, this is the first atrocity story in the military field. It should be pointed out most emphatically that the disseminators of such atrocity stories are taking upon themselves grave responsibility. In view of the Führer's statement before the Reichstag to the effect that the German Air Force received orders to attack military objectives only, provided that the opponent keeps to the same rule, this piece of atrocity reporting has become a dangerous game. A warning against inventing such atrocity tales, the Deutsches Nachrichtenbüro goes on to say, can therefore not be emphatical enough. Such atrocity stories were permitted to go through by another Germany, but not by this one. Germany's currency and financial situation was a subject dealt with at a meeting of the directors of the German Reichsbank, which convened on Saturday with Reich Minister Funk, who holds the post of President of the Reichsbank, presiding. The German Minister of Economics pointed out that not the slightest tendency of nervousness had become noticeable in the German banking and financing system, very much in contrast to such tendencies prevailing in foreign countries. The German exchanges, the minister emphasized, are operating properly and exhibit a confident attitude. The German Reichsbank had therefore no reason for issuing decrees of any kind which might deem necessary for the protection of the currency and the monetary and credit system. All German girls aged between 17 and 25 years, a proclamation by the leader of the Reich Labor Service, read, are being called upon to do honorary service with the labor service for women. Exempted from the call are only those girls who hold positions of special importance. Prime Minister Stauning of Denmark, assisted by the Danish Foreign Minister Dr. Munch, had a conversation on Saturday with the envoy plenipotentiary of the German government, Ambassador von Hassel. The German envoy expressed the German government's keen desire to maintain economic relations with Denmark on the same basis which has been operation up to now. The Danish Prime Minister expressed his gratitude for this declaration and stated that the Danish government, where anxious to observe strict neutrality, is animated by the same desire. The Warsaw newspaper Express Poranny stated on Saturday that Poland never really thought of entering into negotiations with Germany. For Germany, so that paper holds, is no nation with which to sit down for negotiations. Germany is not worthy of being treated as an equal partner in international dealings. In a similar vein, the Polish newspaper Polska Zbrojna, which is close to military circles, rejects the German proposals. Poland's arms, this military organ states, will reply to the latest German offer. In commenting upon the European situation, the Italian press in its Saturday editions points out with emphasis that Adolf Hitler wants to localize the conflict between Germany and Poland. In his speech before the Reichstag, the Führer again announced his decision to refrain from any aggressive action against France or Britain. Only by the initiative of those two powers, the semi-official Giornale d'Italia states, will the Polish conflict develop into a general European conflagration. Italy has done everything in her power to avoid that conflict. For fully 5 months, Germany permitted the Polish problem to be debated upon frankly, and she has left all doors open for negotiations. Italy, this influential Roman newspaper assures its readers, will continue to watch the events with the utmost political and diplomatic vigilance. King Emperor Victor Emmanuel of Italy returned to Rome from his summer residence San Rossore on Saturday. He received Signor Mussolini, who gave him a detailed account of the general situation. Warfare is spreading even to the zoo in London. The administration of the zoological garden had all poisonous snakes and other dangerous animals killed on Saturday. The elephants were shipped away. Beginning on Saturday, all theaters and vaudeville shows in Paris will be closed. Numerous cinemas was forced to cancel their performances for lack of personnel. It is believed that all places of amusements will be closed down in Paris. The Paris newspapers will from now on appear in editions of not more than 4 printed pages. Silver coins valued to 10 and 20 francs and nickel coins valued at 5 francs are to be withdrawn from general circulation in France, a decree published on Saturday stipulates. The Bank of France has been empowered to issue instead notes to the amounts of 5, 10 and 20 francs. A state of siege has been declared for the whole of Egypt on Saturday. Prime Minister Ali Maher has been entrusted with special powers to safeguard public security. Prime Minister de Valera of Ireland read a statement before the Irish Parliament on Saturday in which he declared that the Irish government is firmly determined to remain neutral. At the same time, the government announced the immediate mobilization of the Irish armed forces. The total strength of the Irish army is approximately 25,000 men. Soviet Russia's newly appointed ambassador to Berlin, Alexander Shkvartsev, arrived at the Berlin Aerodrome on Saturday afternoon by a special plane which had been sent to call for him at Stockholm. He was accompanied by Monsieur Vladimir Perkov, the newly appointed secretary to the Soviet-Russian embassy. General Maxim Purkayev, Minister Plenipotentiary for Military Affairs of the Soviet Union, arrived by the same plane with his staff. The officers accompanying General Purkayev are Brigadier General Mikhail Belyakov, Colonel Nikolai Skolonyakov, Major Ivan Bashanov, and Captain Alexander Sedich. The Soviet-Russian ambassador and General Purkayev were met by leading officials of the German Foreign Office and high-ranking officers of the German Armed Force. As announced Saturday in Berlin, the German Navy has provided for the security of the Baltic Sea to such an extent that it has been possible to allow free fishing rights in the Baltic. The commander of the German Armed Forces made the following announcement Saturday evening. The German troops have been advancing successfully along all frontiers. The army detachments operating south of the industrial district of Upper Silesia is approaching the town of Biala and occupied the town of Ples. North of those points, the German troops advanced past the line of Polish dugouts. In the territory north of the Upper Silesian industrial area, our troops are approaching the river Varte. Armored detachments are advancing upon the town of Radomsko, north of the town of Częstochow. The town of Wielun has been occupied. Rapid advances are being made upon the town of Sierać by the troops operating along the line past the town of Kempen. The river of Brahe has been crossed by the German troops operating out of Pomerania and succeeded in reaching the river Vistula at a point southwest of the town of Graudenz in a forcefully land. Thus, the German Army Corps, advancing from East Prussia via the town of Graudenz, has practically succeeded in uniting with the German forces advancing from Pomerania. The Polish army detachments stationed in the northern parts of the corridor section have thus been cut off. They are being mopped up by the German forces in encounters in the section which is known as Tuchel Heath. Other German troop contingents advancing from East Prussia in a southerly direction gain ground. The German troops are advancing upon the town of Prasic. The German Air Force dealt heavy blows to military objectives in Poland by lightning-like actions. Numerous Polish airplanes were destroyed in aerial encounters. A great number of military aerodromes were attacked from the ground, especially in the vicinity of the following towns: Gdynia, Krakow, Lodz, Radom, Dęblin, Brest-Tiraspol, Lublin, Lak, Gotha, Warsaw, Oklechi, Posen, Lewica. The aeroplanes stationed in the hangars and upon the flying fields went up in flames. Furthermore, railway track lines were destroyed and military transports were derailed. Marching columns of the Polish army which were retreating were bombed. A munition plant near Skarczysko-Kamienna exploded after an attack. It is believed that the Polish Air Force has been badly hurt by the successes established today. The German Air Force reigns unrestrictedly above Poland and is now available for other tasks of the protection of the German Rus. Detachments of the German Navy operating in the Bay of Danzig opened fire upon the fortifications and the war port of Hela on Friday afternoon. Air squadrons of the German Navy bombed the war port of Gdynia several times during the day. This is Germany calling. You have just been listening to our regular news service. We now should like to stand by for a special announcement. Further news.
And what a special announcement there was to come. The announcement the following day of the start of the Second World War. And this is that broadcast, 3rd of September 1939, a pretty dark day.
The following official communique has been issued from 10 Downing Street. On September the 1st, His Majesty's ambassador in Berlin was instructed to inform the German government that unless they were prepared to give His Majesty's government in the United Kingdom satisfactory assurances that the German government had suspended all aggressive action against Poland and were prepared promptly to withdraw their forces from Polish territory, His Majesty's government in the United Kingdom would, without hesitation, fulfill their obligations to Poland. At 9 a.m. this morning, His Majesty's ambassador in Berlin informed the German government that unless not later than 11 a.m. British Summer Time, today, September the 3rd, satisfactory assurances to the above effect had been given by the German government and had reached His Majesty's government in London, a state of war would exist between the two countries as from that hour. His Majesty's government are now awaiting the receipt of any reply that may be made by the German government. The Prime Minister will broadcast to the nation at 11:15. That is the end of the announcement. This is London. You will now hear a statement by the Prime Minister.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British Ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany. You can imagine what a bitter blow it is to me that all my long struggle to win peace has failed. Yet I cannot believe that there is anything more or anything different that I could have done and that would have been more successful. Up to the very last, it would have been quite possible to have arranged a peaceful and honorable settlement between Germany and Poland. But Hitler would not have it. Now, may God bless you all, and may He defend the right. For it is evil things that we shall be fighting against. Brute force, bad faith, injustice, oppression, and persecution. And against them I am certain that the right will prevail.
Well, it did, but not before the loss of maybe 25,000, sorry, I should say 25 million lives. 6 million Jewish people lost in concentration camps. God knows how many military, even more civilians than were involved in the First World War. A grim thing that our parents and grandparents had to live through. 2 world wars and a depression. I'm eternally grateful that I was born in the second half of the 20th century and not in the first. Anyway, that being said, let's open up 439-225. And first of all, of course, the call. Peter, are you there? VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
VK3AML, VK3ACZ. Good evening, Chris. And a scary time it must have been.
Yes, indeed. Is there another station there?
Yeah, 3HFX. That was a very interesting broadcast, Chris.
Yeah, did you notice that the Nazis, most of the broadcast was of humdrum events until the last 2 or 3 minutes where they beat the drum about the bombing of different towns in Poland. It is, God, talk about turning a blind eye. VK3HFX, 3AML.
Yes, and as you said, we didn't have to live through that, but of course, in the late 60s, quite a few people had to live through Vietnam. I was actually conscripted to go to Vietnam, not that I was going to go, but then Whitlam came in and abolished the draft. So another lot of crazy people wanted to go, and they wanted me to go and kill people in Vietnam. You know, interesting, isn't it?
Well, I've got some hum. Just hang on a sec. I'll see if I can get rid of that by insulating a few things. It's hum that we haven't had on previous days. Yeah, it was a loose lead. My apologies. Yeah, I missed out on the draft by a hair's breadth. At the time the draft ceased, I was, I think, 18 or 19, expecting to be called up through the ballot. But being born in 1954, I just missed out. But we were all, by that time, I mean, I had the same attitudes as Chris Holliday, without stating it too forcefully, and I certainly supported him and Dan in the construction of the draft resistance pirate radio transmitter, such as I could at the time. I mean, 1971, I was 17. I didn't know that much about electronic design. Dan being a year older, and I think Chris being 2 years older, knew a bit more about it than I. Anyway, VK3ACZ, I should hand it over to you, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I tried to put myself in the position of most UK citizens, well, and quite a few others too, come to think of it. Hearing Chamberlain's words there myself, you know, with the benefit of history hindsight, I find it hard to take him seriously because his what I consider a bit of a gaffe, you know, peace in our time and all that. I think, it's pretty hard to divorce him from both of those. But it's a very telling broadcast, Chris. And we think that, we haven't lived through anything quite like that with the uncertainty and the major change. 9/11 certainly changed us, shaped us a little bit. The media hijacking all commercial television broadcasts for the next 4 days and just showing the buildings collapsing over and over again was pretty abysmal. I guess COVID was a major influence on us and the reactions, government reactions to it, but nothing anyway compared to the uncertainty of that initial time in 1939, which was encapsulated in that broadcast. Well, back to you.
Yes, well, one of the last, hang on, yeah, there's slight hum coming in through the 70 centimetre channel.
Fairly noticeable.
Just as a comment on that, just before I went to air, we had a failure of the main supply for the FT7900, so I've switched over to an alternative supply, and I think it has different circulating earth problems, so that might be the source of those problems. I've got a feeling that the cartridge fuse in the back of my normal power supply was too close, working too close to the limit of the amperage it was designed for, and probably the wire inside it has vaporized through being heated up and cooled down once too often. So I'll be back to the old supply with the less hum. But yeah, one of the last discussions I had with our late friend, who I've often mentioned to you, Peter, Gwen, was about the onset of the Second World War. And she would have been 18. She was born in 1921. And we asked her how it felt, and she said, well, the whole family was sitting around the wireless, listening to the ABC and to Bob Menzies, I think, was the Prime Minister right at the start of the war, before Curtin. And we all felt awful, and what was even worse was that half the people in the room had already been through 4 years of war less than two decades earlier. So you can imagine how they felt. You know,
it was meant to be the war to end all wars, wasn't it?
Yeah. They'd seen friends of theirs in the trenches pulped, and after sometimes losing fingers or a leg to war wounds, to see it all starting again was just the pits. So 1939 really was a year that everybody could have done without. Anyway, over to you, Harry, VK3HFX, VK3AML.
Okay, Chris, look, I'm just going to sit on the side and listen tonight. I'll let you two guys go. I've got a lot of work to do and I want to finish it before we wrap it up later.
Okay.
So I'll be on the side here.
Okay, I understand that quite a few people are finding it... Hang on. Oh, this hum. Can I get rid of it? Hang on. What I can do is turn down the level on the graphic equalizer at 100 hertz. And could you come on for a moment, Peter, just to check the level?
Yeah, sure, and I meant to say good evening, good day to Harry. Sorry about that oversight on my part. That hum is barely noticeable. Don't worry yourself too much about it. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Yeah, I'm listening directly off my off-air monitors. What do you call it? The discriminator. So I'm probably hearing the full frequency response that very few other people are hearing. I'm actually listening off the headphone output of the digital recorder that's connected to the discriminator. So the slightest deviation from what it should be, I can certainly hear. I'm not entirely happy with one piece of equipment. That's the Behringer peak limiter, because I'm actually having to do a lot of manipulation of the level control, particularly Harry 3HFX has about 6 dB higher audio level than you do, Pete. So I was manipulating the level of the mixer up and down to accommodate Harry's control. I should tell you, this morning I got a telegram from the department.
The department?
The department. Yes, and I opened it up thinking, oh shit, what have I done this time?
Yeah.
Whoa!
The department.
I see, the department is there. Anyway, in the old days it would always have been something like, Mr. Sanderson, we have noted that you have mentioned on numerous occasions going to pick up a hamburger from George's Hamburger Bar in Caulfield. We want you to cease and desist from this advertising practice. And signed Dini for Controller. This, and underneath it, this affects the Wireless Telegraphy Act 1903, paragraph XXX, to which please refer. In that sort of time. And would come on blue paper. You got a bluey. So I thought I'd got a bluey, but no, it was a member of the department offering some assistance in relaying these transmissions on 160 metres. So at first my face turned pale when I saw where it had come from, and then my wife came in and said, Chris, why are you uncontrollably laughing? Because I laughed for about 10 minutes, Pete. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
Oh, sounds like there's been some funny business in the circus. The clowns have been revolting. Sounds good, Chris.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Chris, if I've upset your afternoon.
Did you get the reply?
I did get your reply, yes.
Yes, there's a good long list of sources for material.
I saw that.
Mm.
Well, thank you for your reply, Chris, but I thought it was necessary to seek your approval.
You seek my approval?
To rebroadcast your content.
Okay.
So I thought the right thing to do would be to formally address you.
Oh, Christ. I think that's worth printing out and framing on my shack wall.
After all the fun we've had with the cross-banding, we would make a complaint if you didn't, Steve. Good evening.
Exactly, very good. Well, I'm happy to tell you all that the 160 rebroadcast is currently up and running. All right. And being received quite well on ZL2KS in Marlborough.
Oh, yes.
On the North Island of New Zealand.
Near Picton, I know the area.
I'm looking at it now. So I did need to make some changes to the setup. I'd been doing a very crude test last two occasions and wasn't happy at all with the audio quality, so I've got a more permanent and professional patch now. I needed to make some a voltage divider, I guess you'd call it, to match the VHF receiver with the MF transmitter, which seems to work quite well. Although I miscalculated the voltage required to drive the MF microphone, I arranged the circuit to deliver a much lower voltage than was actually required. So after I built this thing, I put it in service and the audio level was very low, so I had to change the voltage divider to increase the level drive into the medium wave transmitter, which I've now done, and it seems to be working quite well. The audio is much cleaner than it was. So.
Yes. The thing I noticed, Steve, was that the audio sounded a bit woofy, not as much treble as I was putting out, or at least it sounded a bit that way through the AM, so it might need a bit of treble boost somewhere along the line. I'm not aiming at communications quality. I'm trying to make it more, broad bandwidth, approximately 80 hertz to approximately 5K. And through my off-air monitor, I achieved that, as you could probably tell from the logs I put up on YouTube. But it's not completely clean here either. I have to do a bit more work to try and work out where the distortion's getting in, whether it's a function that I can't fix of the linearity of the VCO in the FT7900, or whether it's some deficiency of my off-air monitor's discriminator, but there is perceptible distortion, particularly in the trebles. It's good, but it's not hi-fi. So I remember when Dave had his set up, he actually tapped into the radio. He didn't rely on any digital input plug on the back of the radio. He actually tapped straight in. But then he was using I think a Philips FM 900 or something similar, which was discrete componentry, not largely integrated circuits, and he could get at all sorts of different parts of the equipment, not dealing with bloody surface mount. Because tapping into surface mount is almost impossible, particularly at my age with a big soldering iron. Anyway, over to you, Pete. VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
3AML in the group, 3ACZ. Well, I just want to say again that the cross-banding has given me the most fun I've had in ages. And that includes getting over to ZL under my own steam. But for some strange reason, it was even more fun again doing it on AM 1865. Just loved it. Oh, quick run through about today's events. The VHF UHF field day was on today, and by goodness, there was a lack of attendance. KQ and ER were no appearance, Your Worship. It was all very slack. The first hour I spent on 23 centimetres, and I contacted Greg, and he was using the call sign ND, believe it or not, and Richard 3FP over at Hillside near Calder Park Racetrack. I made a total of 8 contacts on 4 bands. It was very dismal. Oh, but I did get to speak to Quiet Achiever on 2 and 70. He was up near King Lake, somewhere there, on a park. It wasn't a new park for me, but because it was a contest day, I was able to give him 2 call signs. So that was 4 contacts in all on 2 and 70. And he was a really nice, strong signal. He must have had some elevation. One interesting thing about it all, and the first time I got on 23 centimetres and found that talking to people over the other side of town was better if I aimed in the opposite direction than them. If that wasn't enough to get me started, and it was, I did similar today. 70 centimetres, I spoke with Richard 3 Fox Papa, and he was about strength 3, and that was aiming my 10 element beam at him. When I turned it to face Mount Dandenong Towers, I just put out a call, and he came back to me and said, "Oh, you're right up now. You're strength 7 to 8," and he was too. So reflection off the TV towers or something like that. We did the same. He was actually stronger on 23 centimetres when I pointed at Mount Dandenong rather than to the west. So I find that sort of stuff quite fascinating and endearing. So anyway, that's about the story of today. 5 new POTA parks all around VK, and that's the sum total of my day. Anyway, waffled long enough about that. Over to you, Steve, VK3ZH, VK3ACZ in the group.
VK3ACZ and the group, VK3ZH. Well, I didn't do any radio today. I had a little listen for the Winterfield Day. I heard a few calling CQ on 2 metres, but I didn't work anyone. But it was very slim pickings, and you're right, none of the big field stations were out this winter. I know that Ralph and Damien, the KQ team, were not keen to go up to Enfield. It's just too bloody cold and wet and windy this time of year, and the chance of losing a gazebo or 3 is very, very high. So there was none of that to happen. So just a few home stations is what I heard, Pete, and it sounds to me like you might have worked most of them. So I rehearsed my talk today with a friend of mine over MS Teams, who's a colleague, and I rehearsed it with my family on a screen here at home as well. I'm heading off to Cairns on Monday morning to present to the Bio-EM conference this week coming, the Bioelectromagnetics scientific conference in Cairns for a week. Mostly scientific, industry and academia, discussing all things electromagnetic energy. And so I'm presenting about the government's work on our measurement program for EME that we've been doing since 2020. So did my presentation practicing today twice, and feeling relatively comfortable. I don't like public speaking. It's not something that I'm good at.
I would disagree with that, Steve.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. At Rosebud, you well and truly held your own, but that's almost 10 years ago.
It's funny, Chris, you know, like I can have a conversation about something and just ad lib if it's something casual, but with this sort of stuff, I need to, you know, cover off very specific points, and I tend to lose the plot quickly if I don't have a script. So I've got a script that I rehearse many times until it becomes natural, and then I read from it and or look down at it and glance and look back up at the audience and get it word for word. So there's no ums or ahs, it's just straight from the script, and that keeps me on track and gives me a bit of confidence when I'm a little bit overwhelmed in front of hundreds of people. But That's what I'm doing this week. Some people say they prefer deaf to public speaking. But I'll be doing that on Wednesday morning. Looking forward to that. VK3AML, VK3ZH.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in the contents of that. I know that 3EIP, what was his name? Dear, oh dear.
Dr. George Kalanis.
George, yes. He did a very thought-provoking article in Amateur Radio last issue, but one which has created quite a bit of correspondence in the latest issue. And he came on here a few days ago on this. I hear all sorts of conflicting reports about the medical implications of electromagnetic radiation and exposure, which vary from absolute new age woo of people thinking that their babies are being irradiated by ionizing radiation, which of course it isn't, through to perhaps more concerning reports of people who live under 660 kV power lines and are continually exposed to 50 hertz, very high fields. Not much research has gone into that as far as I know. I think most of the medical implications for RF are at the very high frequencies, microwaves and such, where the body can more often absorb the thermal impact of the radiation. And I know, for instance, that at the end of the Second World War, during the late 1940s, a lot of rear gunners in the RAAF started to lose their sight through the opacity of their vitreous humour. They'd been sitting close to a radar installation in the plane, and it has basically started to cook the vitreous humour of the eye as you would cook the albumin in an egg. Are you covering that sort of thing, Steve, or is it more to do with regulation?
Well, the program we've been running is more about providing assurance to public around, I guess it started with telco infrastructure, particularly small cells and 5G. A lot of deployment of that technology going on. 5G was a big fear issue for people, particularly the way that 5G works in terms of directed beams sent to the handset rather than RF being broadcast uniformly in all directions. It's now focused the user. So there was a bit of concern about that and a lot of misinformation as well. So that's been the focus of our measurement program, telecommunications infrastructure. It did extend in 2023, I think it was. We did an in-building program to look at what typical exposure was like indoors, or where people spend most of their time, whether it be at work or at home or at school or in a shopping centre. So we measured a bunch of locations where people spend time, public transport, public events like sporting events, those sorts of things, and did a series of measurements. So from a compliance point of view, if we see something that's higher than typical, then, and if it raised a concern around compliance, we're not actually an accredited measurement agency. We would need to have an accredited person do a measurement to validate our findings from a compliance point of view, but we've seen nothing that's anywhere close to the maximum exposure standard levels, except for places like high power AM and FM broadcast stations, TV, co-located sites on big mountains and things like that, where we're talking about many kilowatts of power and multiple transmitters co-located on the same site. So the average run-of-the-mill mobile phone tower, the levels we've seen are about less than 20% of the maximum that the standard allows. So quite small levels. But you talked about people getting injured, and it's a bit like stepping into a microwave oven, isn't it? If you timed out there, if you want to get cooked, then high field RF would do it, and it tends to affect areas of high moisture. So, like you say, the eyes. And there's one other place that you might want to keep away from the RF too, Chris. It's in the nether regions. Back to you.
So, are you saying don't carry a 5G mobile phone in your pocket?
Though.
And something I get annoyed about, you guys need to label the 5G towers. It's so annoying. The last few times I've set fire to the towers, they've only been 4G in protest.
Right. Oh, God.
Oh, also, forgive me for bringing silliness into a serious conversation, but Steve, if you're going to be away on Monday, you need to put a security guard on your antennas. But then again, you will also know, if you do get back and they've disappeared, at least you'll know where they are.
Well, I'm happy to leave a key at the door for you, Pete. You can come and plug in if you like and keep the shack warm. And but no, I think... if you want to take the antennas, this week is the time to do it, Pete. Yeah, well, that's interesting. I heard some stories during the 60s, a fellow that was doing training with us on safe working around radio, and he was talking about riggers that would climb in the UK, where it's very cold. They'd be working on a tower, and it was such a climb that they would need to take their lunch with them and the kit for the day, that it was too difficult to return to the ground and eat. They just have to take everything with them, complete their work on the tower for the day, and then come back down at the end. And so they'd crawl up into a section of the tower for lunch that was protected by a big radome around the outside. This happened to be where the VHF antenna was, so they would get inside this nice warm part of the structure where they could sit there on a cold, wintry English day and be protected from the weather and get nice and warm and eat their lunch while they were sitting in a 10 kilowatt near field to a VHF transmitter, so it did keep them warm, Chris.
Yeah, well, I have heard of some incidents that were produced by people. You can imagine in the Collingwood Fitzroy area, where the consumption of interesting substances and the smoking of interesting substances predominate, there were a lot of people that got uppity about the proximity of radio masts. And for a long time after the departure of 3CR from Armidale in 1977, they were broadcasting out of an antenna, a fairly short antenna, at the back of Collingwood Town Hall near the rail line, right next to a kindergarten. Anyway, there was a lot of complaint. I had left the station by this time, so I only heard of this, but I heard it from several people, so it was confirmed. That there'd been lots and lots of complaints about 3CR's antenna being there, particularly after Ralph Knight of 3CR designed a diplexer and allowed another AM transmitter, that of 3RPH, which in those days was on AM, I think on 1620 or something like that, just above the end of the broadcast band, operating under the Wireless Telegraphy Act, and mostly people at the Blind Institute reading newspapers for the benefit of the blind. Anyway, the two transmitters were working through that tower by the end of the 1970s at the back of Collingwood Town Hall, and they had a series of threats by phone by somebody who had a double axe to grind. He didn't like what 3CR was transmitting, number one, and he didn't like the fact that RF fields were getting from 3CR's transmitter into a kindergarten that was maybe 30 or 40 metres away. Mind you, 3CR was only running 500 watts at that stage, I think, or a kilowatt at the most. And one day they found that the transmitter had tripped out because somebody had got a wire, connected it with a big battery clip to an earth connection, and on the end of the wire they'd thrown a grappling hook high up on the AM transmitting mast, which caused the whole system to short out and two transmitters to go kerlunk off the air. And the damage relating to that probably could be related by 3HFX. I think he might have been at the station at the time. But I think there were a few burns involved with that. Are you still there, Harry?
Yeah, I am, but I don't have a recollection of that incident. I do remember we had a working bee bearing aerials around the antenna one weekend. That was kind of fun. Yeah, 3RPH is still on AM. It's up at what is it? Up the road now. We look after it inside the same shack as news radio.
Oh, okay. So it's what, in the Viewbank area?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, it might have been before your time, actually, Harry, because I think I might have just been on the brink of leaving at that time. I know who it was that did that, but I better not say who it was. It wasn't me, nor was it with my approval. But this guy really, he had a chip on the shoulder to everybody, and it just goes to show that an AM transmitter that doesn't have an adequate security fence is not immune to interference of that type. VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
ARD.
Oh.
Hello. Good to hear Matty. I'll throw it straight over to you, Matt. Well, you don't have to do that. VK3... Oh, this is VK3ARD in the group. I thought I'd just pop in and say hello. I'm on the FTM 150 and I'm not really hearing an echo, so things seem to be good tonight.
Well, you should be hearing an echo. I'm getting you quite strongly, Matty.
Oh, well, I mean, there's no... the latency seems to be low enough that it's not it's not an echo that's throwing me off. So I can hear myself, but it's coming through at such a low latency that it's not that I can barely tell.
You're probably more used to latency, but that would come mostly if you were doing A to D conversions along the way, and we're certainly not. But yeah.
I did have a question for Steve. Were you talking about the 5G stuff? I remember reading all about the 5G having beam steering, but I've read something, I don't know, at the end of last year maybe, that said that almost no one has actually implemented that in any towers, that it's, you know, it's like an optional part of 5G, and no one's really bothered with the beam steering stuff. I'd be I don't know, be interested to know. I assume it was just too much work, but I wonder if my sources are right, or or if that is it sounds like it's a concern for RF. That's all. I'd be interested.
Yeah, g'day, Matty. It's definitely in use and has been since 2021. Almost exclusively used now on 3.5 gigahertz for 5G. There, beamforming is pretty much the only way it's delivered now. I think the telcos are starting to use it on lower frequencies as well, but the antennas are very complex and need many arrays to be able to steer, and the lower in frequency you go, the bigger the antennas need to be. To have the number of arrays to get the resolution in the steering requires the antenna to be very large. So it's being used, I think, on 2600 megahertz as well in some cases. But anything below that, I think, is just sectorized, broadcast in all directions, in a direction from a sector in a single panel antenna. But certainly, 3.5 gig, 26 gig, even more. We did a lot of testing on millimetre wave for beamforming. Very sharp beams there, Matty. Less than a degree beam width there. Very hard to catch, actually. But I developed a methodology for measuring beamforming in Australia. That's been my claim to fame, how to actually capture a beam and measure it. That was the methodology that I put together. And we've made about 1,000 measurements now, Matty, of beamformed 5G. So very much in use.
Very interesting. It was on the internet, so I was probably hearing about US deployments more than Australian ones. So that's really cool. I'll have to look into that. I saw someone recently was doing beam forming with maybe 2.4 or 5.6 gigahertz stuff, off the shelf stuff, and was creating great big arrays on these PCBs to play with it. So it's interesting how it's already getting into a certain level of the hobbyist market now. I'll have to go up and see why they aren't using it here, because my internet sucks.
Yeah, Matty, if you go onto Google and just Google ACMA 5G Compliance Priority Program, the first one I think was 2122. If you Google that, you'll be able to download a report. I've written 3 reports now that have been published online that talk about the beamforming and the methodology and what we did and how we did it and all that stuff and the results and the levels and all that sort of thing. Then there's also a millimetre wave one as well that we did in 23, published in 23. So if you Google 5G millimetre wave, ACMA Compliance Priority Program 5G millimetre wave 2023, you'll find a report on the 26 gig stuff as well, Matty.
Very cool. I'm Googling that now. Thank you. It sounds really interesting.
Your measurement of the polar patterns of 26 gigahertz, does that involve waving around a field strength meter or something?
Almost, Chris. Almost. The difficult part is to attract the beam in the first place, and to do that, we had a Google Pixel 7 smartphone, which is 26 gig capable, with some software running on it that told me what band it was on and what the RSSI and uplink and downlink power was on the device. So I was able to actually use a phone to find a sweet spot under the site, then draw the beam with an app called Ookla, which attracts data at a high rate. and then when you run the speed test and you can see the throughput in excess of 10 gigabits per second, you know you're on the beam. And then the idea is to put the measurement probe between the antenna and the telephone device and capture it with the probe and watch it on the spectrum analyzer as it comes through. So it's difficult with 26 gigahertz because it's very much line of sight. You've got to be right in front of it and not more than a couple hundred metres away, otherwise you just don't get the RF.
You do have attenuation due to rain at those frequencies?
No? Not that we're able to detect the 26 gig, no. If it was kilometres perhaps. But the path is only good for a few hundred metres anyway. And the way the networks operate is that if the link budget is in any way compromised, the handset's reporting all of its alternatives to the network as well. And if it says, well, this signal on 26 gig getting a little bit crap, and the network will just push you down to a lower band where the link budget is much better, and of course you'll continue your transactions there. So it's a bit hit and miss, but you've got to be really close to it, Chris, and no attenuation in the rain. Not that I did many heavy rain measurements.
So,
Steve, just curious, how much penetration or how little penetration at those frequencies through buildings?
None. Impossible to get 26 gig to pass through a window, Pete. We tried all of that. Tried measuring inside across the street from a site where you could look through the window and see the antenna. Couldn't get it to work. If it hits anything, it just says no. It doesn't penetrate at all.
So it's opaque. Glass is opaque to those frequencies.
Well, I'm not sure that it's completely opaque, but there is attenuation there, and I would say it could be up around 10 dB. Now, it may be that the glass, the film on the glass for the UV protection has a lot more to do with the attenuation of the glass itself. But we did try some indoor measurements across the street from 26 gig sites, and we just couldn't get a reliable connection on that band through from outside into inside.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I would imagine that would limit its utility.
Great for things like sporting stadiums, shopping centres, indoor where you've got lots and lots and lots of people that are very close to the infrastructure, railway stations, shopping. Oh,
you mean like video Wi-Fi from people with roving?
Little hotspots.
Yep.
It's as good as a Wi-Fi hotspot essentially, and because it can be repeated very close by, it's very, very good at soaking up capacity. So you can absorb a lot of traffic with this sort of stuff, but you've got to be right on top of it for it to work.
Yeah. Okay. And it would have very broad bandwidth. And I suppose the
1 gigahertz of bandwidth, Chris, from 26.0 gigs to 27.0 is each of the network operators. They have 1,000 meg each.
When you think that 50 years ago the average household had one 3 kilohertz telephone channel with a carbon mic.
Crazy, right?
I think even the early mobile phones, mind you, they were like carrying around a house brick with straps on the side. Remember the rubber ducky antenna on the side of the handset, and then you, what was it, 870 to 890 megahertz?
Well, you could certainly use one of, I think the reason that the two desktop receiver scanners, one of which I'm using as an off-air monitor, the reason they were originally bought was so that people who didn't have much of a life themselves could listen in on other people's phone conversations.
I must admit I did a little bit of that.
Didn't we all?
You remember the old 500 megahertz Telstra network? They called it, I think the phone number began with 007 back in the 80s. Do you remember that?
They shut it all down in about the year 2000, didn't they?
Might have even been earlier than that. But it wasn't a cellular network, it was a broadcast network of repeaters. Melbourne had, I don't know, maybe half a dozen or so. There were sites in high places, Mount Dandenong, Arthur's Seat, Mount St Leonard, Mount Macedon, CBD, Doncaster Shopping Town. All of the key, land mobile sites had Telstra 500 megahertz mobile telephone sites on them, analogue. And I used to love listening to the analogue mobile phones on my Bearcat 2020. Do you remember the famous phone call between, was it Howard and Keating, I think it was, that was recorded by a scanner operator and sent to the news?
Oh.
Remember that?
There were some interesting conversations between Pollies that were...
Yeah, wasn't it Keating? Kennett and...
It was the member for Kooyong.
Peacock.
Yes.
Yeah, my claim to fame was I heard Tom Cruise when Top Gun was being advertised out here in Australia. He came out for a promotional tour and he was actually talking to somebody back home from a car phone.
Yeah, well, in the old days you used to be able to pick up 3 types of phone, and the phone network was it leaked like a sieve in terms of security. There were cordless phones on about 1.7 megs, just below 160 metres, one of which somehow Tony managed to get his 160 metre transmitter on FM and had a conversation with some woman down the road.
I had a 30 meg handset at one stage.
Yeah,
I had a scanner and I was listening to all the conversations at home without letting anybody know that I could do it. But that night, that political phone call with all the obscenities and all that the media ran with, I was actually listening that night and I nodded off. Not to say that I would have found it in the scanning, but there weren't an awful lot of calls on, so I came very close to it but missed it.
Well, those 30 megahertz ones you could hear from about 3 or 4 blocks away. The worst thing I ever heard, perhaps I shouldn't talk about it. Well, I will. It's so long ago. Was a girl ringing up her boyfriend to tell him that he'd put a bun in the oven, and him freaking out and saying, "I'll be in another country tomorrow." I thought, oh God, I'm sitting there. It was like a soap opera. I'm kind of glad we can't listen in on that basis anymore. I was quite shocked. Anyway, that was in my old days in Surrey Hills. Sorry, Peter, I shouldn't be talking about that.
I'm still trying to remember. Was it the political phone call? It was Peacock and Kennett slagging off about Howard, wasn't it?
Yes, that's definitely it. And God knows it's things like that probably instituted developments in digital networking with some degree of encoding. Sorry, I didn't mean to drag it all to a halt.
Those 30 megahertz cordless phones back then, some of them, the base stations were relatively high power, several watts, and would go some distance. I remember hearing them in the 80s as well, and I lived on top of a hill in Murrelbark, and I could hear phone calls from people in Croydon, like 5 or 6 kilometres away. It was a band into itself. You could listen to phone calls aplenty, and I've forgotten. It was a relatively narrow section. It was only a few hundred kilohertz, but and I do remember using a phone on that band at the time, and often having interference from people who were also using the phone down the street, or possibly in a neighbouring suburb.
Yeah, there was a trick you could do with them. Although normally, if they weren't receiving their own base station they would cut off. If you just left the phone on with the base station running and then walked away from the base station, the receiver would continue. So on occasions, this is going back to my days in East Hawthorn, about 1990. I'd take it for a walk. I'd walk to the local park, and on the way you could tell where different people were having their phone calls from. Again, I shouldn't be talking about this, but it was a period which almost invited being a busybody.
Well, speaking of that, by the way, when I heard Tom Cruise, I didn't hear anything super significant or earth-shattering, anything that I could sell, but he did remark to the person on the other end that he was amazed to be talking on a car phone back home to America, not because the technology didn't exist there, I gather, because he thought of Australia as such a backwater. He was amazed we had that sort of thing.
What's happened to the old analogue phone frequencies? Have they been used by digital, or are they now blank, or what?
Well, the original 500 megahertz segment that Telstra, when they had their first proper mobile network, if you want to call it that, it wasn't cellular, it was a series of repeaters, was I think 501 to 512 or something like that. It was the first 10 meg. That's all land mobile now. So it's used by commercial, Department of Defence. It's used by police. So that's the top part of the land mobile band. From 420 to 520 megahertz is all your commercial UHF, and above 520 is TV and lipid stuff. So it's all being used by commercial UHF two-way operators now.
Just changing the subject a bit, Steve, are you at liberty to say why Australia has no access to the band between 3.5 and 3.7 and 3.9 megs?
3.7 and 3.9. It'll be because there's defence channels in there, Chris. That's why.
I mean, the Americans call that 75 metres, and there's an awful lot.
New Zealand have got it.
Yeah. I've just been always curious as to why Australia has that hole. I mean, some other countries are worse. In Japan, 80 metres is in like 4 or 5 little chunks with chunks out of it for weather facts, I think.
Now, Chris, I often hear the ZLs running their nets on about 3.740.
Well, in America, most of the phone operation is between 3.7 and 3.9. There's most of what's below 3.7, occasional sideband stragglers, but mostly CW. So it's actually hard to get a contact through to America if you're running sideband on our 80 metre band, because they're a little bit up higher. Maybe you could run split frequency, I don't know, if you by arrangement, of course. But I've always been curious, and obviously there must be some military or defence application I don't know about.
Yaesu have done something funny. All my radios till now have been able to transmit above 3.8, but the new FTX doesn't. It won't even transmit between 3.7 and the DX window.
Oh.
So Yaesu have really taken it to task somehow.
Yeah. Anyway.
The ACMA says, what is it, 3.7 to what, 3.9?
Yes.
It is fixed mobile, 3.7 to 3.776, and then it says it's amateur for 24 kilohertz, and then it says 3.8 to 3.9 is fixed mobile, and it matches Region 1 aeronautical mobile.
Okay. I very rarely hear anything on it locally, though. The only thing that I hear there, which really is a pain in the neck, and a few points further south, is over-the-horizon radar, which effects frequently, stuff between 3.6 and 3.7. Dave, when he was running 3670 as an HF simulcast frequency for what he was doing with, his crossbands further up, frequently, if he listened in on an SDR, he couldn't hear his own signal for the level of over-the-horizon radar, which we traced to China, almost certainly China. And from what I can work out from the location of the station and the places I have heard it most strongly, namely New Zealand's South Island west coast, it's beaming from them towards the Straits of Formosa. So I wouldn't mind betting it's the Chinese taking a careful look at shipping up and down between Taiwan and the Chinese coast. But that's just an assumption of mine. But I think it's a fairly intelligent assumption, I think.
I can tell you who it is to.
Oh?
It's assigned to AUS 57, which is the Australian Defence Force to receive. So it's Defence Force. It has 3.7 to 3.776 and then 3.8 to 3.9.
Okay. Yeah.
We're getting a bit of interference from the ZLs.
Well, yes. I did a trip to New Zealand in 2017, I think it was, with 7MJ and Prue and a couple of Prue's nursing friends. And we spent a couple of nights on the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand, one at Westport, I think it was. And Dave had asked me whether I could check how his 3.67 meg transmission was coming in on the west coast of the South Island, which is, of course, closest possible you can get in inhabited country to our part of Australia. So I took my Sony HF receiver. I had a very interesting evening. I had to go out quite late when most of the girls had gone to bed because Dave was starting at 10 o'clock and that was midnight over there. So at midnight I took the Sony receiver and I ran out about 20 or 30 metres of very fine hookup wire along the tops of the tea tree, the beach at Westport. This is a town that's somewhat north of Greymouth on the west coast of the South Island. And the over-the-horizon radar was doing S9+5. And the trouble was Dave was doing the same signal, so he was very hard to hear. The thing that I remember about that particular thing was I was hiding with earpieces and the digital recorder in among the tea tree. And at midnight, a couple of drunks came out from the pub on the other side of the road. And I'm sitting there, listening to the, 3670, and these guys, they walk up near the very thick tea tree that I'm sitting under, can't see me, and I wondered what they were doing. They were standing there, and I heard them unzip, and then I thought to myself, oh, God, I hope when they piss, they don't piss on me. Unfortunately, they missed, but only by about a metre. They never knew I was there. But, oh dear, that's as close as I've ever come to having a very unfortunate interaction with New Zealanders. But yeah, the over-the-horizon radar that we hear at the top end of 80 metres, our 80 metres, was nowhere near as strong in Melbourne as it is in New Zealand. So there is some directivity out in that direction, and I believe that the source is China. we're hearing it after a few hops, I think, from New Zealand. Anyway, just a thought. VK3ACZ, VK3AML group.
3AML, 3ACZ. I often wonder about the identity of the various radars we hear. I gather we don't hear anything from our Dawn at all because it's pointed away from us, but there's that WikiLinks or whatever it is website that gives samples of what it all sounds like. Interesting thing though, I've been talking to JAs on 20 metres and we've had difficulty with the radar and they'll say, oh yeah, it's China interfering with us. And then I QSY and I talk to somebody, say in Spain or whatever, and they'll say, oh, it's that Russian radar again. And it's all the same thing. So I don't suppose that most of us, mere mortals, know what it is or where it's coming from. It's just a pain in the rear. And I note too, there are various kinds. There's the radar that runs about 150 kilohertz all the way through the important part of a band. There's stuff that's and goes for hours. There's other stuff that's about 10 or 15 kilohertz wide that's intermittent or periodic short bursts, and of course all different sounds as well. But all to say, nothing sacred. I've heard it WMV, is that, the maritime radio weather broadcasts and the like.
Oh, yes.
It's been interfering on those frequencies as well. So I gather they have no thought whatsoever as to where they're transmitting. I wonder if they upset the aeronautical frequencies. Wouldn't be at all surprised.
Quite possible.
Well, the 3.7 to 3.9 megahertz segment is very crowded. There are 3,531 records between 3.7 and 3.9. Now, most of those records are transmit-receive pairs. So you'll have a transmit record and a receive record on the same frequency, but even still, 3,500 records, and most of them are police, fire services, as Maddie said, defence is in there, mining, St John's Ambulance, Telstra have some frequencies, SES, there's a few councils.
I've very rarely heard anything there. Are they frequency hopping or something?
No, they're regular 3 kilohertz channel 3K00J3ES sideband 3 kilohertz. That's the emission designator on all of them.
Heavens. I've never heard anything there of sideband.
Yeah, Queensland Police, Victorian Fire Service, Queensland Police.
A backup for something, perhaps?
Possibly, but mostly emergency and safety of life and defence.
Oh, okay. So
still on the subject of radar, I don't hear, and I'm sure there's the same amount of listenings involved, I don't hear as much on 20 metres as I would have 2 or 3 years ago, which is kind of surprising because we still have a war in Europe, as you know. We still have the concerns around the South China Sea and all that as well. But of all the bands that if I'm going to hear radar interference, it's going to be 15 metres. The propagation must just be suited for whatever their purposes are at the moment. That would be the major use I find from my listening experience at least.
15 metres would be pretty good for coming from China too. There's a few places that log and track all those radar things because from what I've seen, they're fairly unique. They all, some even have idents in them, some have timings in them, the bandwidth and the type of, and the, some have spaces in them and all sorts of things. And people log all that and track all that, and then you can use SDRs, to try and work out, at least what part of the world that they're coming from. So you can you can track down some of them, like that strange, almost FSK signal on 40 meters was tracked to Russia, just a Russian signal. Because it was unique, and and you just keep trying SDRs, and see until you can get a pretty good idea of where it's coming from.
Yeah, Matty, there's all sorts of odd signals on 40 metres. The one that I tracked down, I did notice that between 1 p.m, this is local time, Melbourne, between 1 p.m. and 1:30 p.m, almost every day, there's a band of obviously multi-subcarrier OFDM digital centred on 7205 kilohertz, and I hooked up one of the SDRs, I think it was Strathbogie, and switched to DRM, Digital Radio Mondiale, and sure enough, it was a French broadcast service using DRM, 10 kilohertz wide, in the French language, Radio France, and I can't think that 7205 kilohertz would be actually in France. Only place I can think of that it would be French Polynesia somewhere, possibly Noumea.
I did look it up. It's TDF.
Yes, that's
in
it.
France, and it is being broadcast from Issoudun in France. They've just registered. I think it's on the DRM website. They're just they've been letting people know that that they're doing testing.
Surely they can't be getting a signal across on 7205 to Australia in the middle of the day.
I don't know. Maybe they've got a really, really big I don't know.
100-element stacked beam or something.
New Caledonia is my guess.
It would be mine too. Because it was a strong signal. It was about 10 over 9. There were no dropouts. You could receive it continuously as a digital stream.
Matty, is there any discussion on the web about frequency hopping radar systems on HF, and anyone that's had a go at trying to identify and track down any of those?
I haven't come across any. No, I haven't come across that. There's a couple of people who I think would be interested if they could do that, and I haven't seen anything from them about it.
Yeah, see, most of the modern nations now use frequency hopping radar systems on HF that are impossible to track, and as an amateur, they may appear on our bands, but for such a brief moment on any given frequency, we'd never notice it. It would just be part of the noise. But they're so frequency agile now, these radar systems, that they can run lots and lots of high power, spanning 20, 30 megahertz of bandwidth, and we'd never know they were there because they're not received on a static frequency. You might just see a slight rise in the noise if you get a couple of hits where you're listening, but they're super efficient and super hard to find.
That might be why I've not heard the 150 kilohertz wide for hours type stuff in a long time.
Did you all see the BBC documentary about Duga 2, the Russian woodpecker?
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yes, Duga 2. There's a very interesting BBC documentary about it. It's on YouTube. It talks about
the building of the Russian woodpecker just near. It's in the Ukraine, not far from Chernobyl. In fact, I think it might actually be in the exclusion zone. But the antenna array is something to be in awe of. It's an amazing engineering piece.
There, before I stopped my regular weekly webcasts in 2022, one of the programs I was intending to do, which I was rather stymied by, was on what they call unwin radar, radar that points south towards the southern auroral zone. There are 3 of them that I'm aware of in Australia. There's one at a place called Ararua, which is just south of Invercargill on the Ararua Plains. There's another one on South Bruny Island in Tasmania, and there's a 3rd one just north of Adelaide at a place the name of which escapes me at the moment. All of them consist of 2 rows of log periodics. I think the front row is a broad row of spaced 8 log periodics on a mast about maybe 30 or 40 metres tall. And at the back of that, behind them, also pointing south, are an array of 4 log periodics pointing south, and I believe one set interacts with the others to provide an altitude adjustment to the beam, and the phasing of the 8 front log periodic transmissions gives you an azimuth control of where the beam's going, and those things were used to plot auroral interference nominally. But when I approached the people who were in charge of it, strangely at La Trobe University, they did not reply to any of my emails. There was also a girl who had graduated from there who was in control of a similar radar pointing north from Svalbard, from Spitsbergen, north of Norway. And I wrote to her to ask her if she could be interviewed over the Zoom. And again, no reply from her. So the only thing I can assume is that apart from the scientific research, which any scientist would be prepared to talk about, there must be hidden military applications, and I'm not surprised.
I'm in smug mode. At least I can say I've worked that entity. Juliet Whiskey 5 Echo.
Yes, Svalbard. That's impressive.
Not many people there.
Do you remember Gwen, Pete? She was the VK3AML. She's since passed, but she was the QSL manager at the Eastern and Mountain Districts Radio Club. Chris, you might remember Gwen. She went to Svalbard with Alara for an Alara meet, and they operated there for a period of a few weeks. And I got her QSL card from Svalbard. She lives in Melbourne. Yes, I worked her in Svalbard on 15 metres as a novice. One of my highlights, I remember it well.
Oh, well done, Steve. That's way better than me. I was on 20, and of all the things I was about to pack up one evening, and I heard Juliet Whiskey 5 Echo calling CQ, and I thought, oh, not another JA. I've worked half a dozen of them. What the heck, one more. And, of course, I didn't realise at the time that not all J's belonged to Japan. I certainly quickly found out. Mind you, I still had to look up where he told me he was. They've got a webcam that does very slow 360-degree circles, so you can see day or night, and obviously the nights go for a long, long time. But you can have a look at the countryside. Needless to say, it's all white.
How far above the Arctic Circle is it, Pete? It must be some distance.
I think it's actually inside the Arctic Circle by quite a way. The one thing that did come out of the radar girl that I looked up on Facebook. She had photographs of herself up, in a, what do they call it, a bosun's chair, helping to set up the radar with some new feed system. And one of the comments made was that they never go outside the settled area without a rifle because of polar bears. Can you imagine that?
I've got a thing about Svalbard. There are actually signs outside the town, I don't know, 50 metres or 100 metres around telling you, do not go past due to polar bears.
Yes.
There, good old Google has just told me between 74 and 81 degrees north.
Mm.
Well, I got two things. One, why the POTA meets in Albury-Wodonga each year and not in Svalbard. and two, I looked up the France DRM station, and they are, I don't know how to pronounce it, they're TDF. They have an antenna system there for shortwave. They have an antenna that's fully rotatable curtain, so they can aim it. It's 80 metres tall and weighs 200 tonnes.
Oh, Christ.
It's a 500 kilowatt radio.
Half a megawatt.
And they have 12 of them.
Holy crap.
There are 12 identical 80 metre rotatable curtain style 500 kilowatt transmitters.
So
they're doing DRM at the moment.
They can sit in France transmitting all their French stuff, and people walking around Noumea with little HF radios can hear digital radio.
I think, Steve, can you get out your field meter when they beam form 12 of those add up?
That's a scary antenna, isn't it? That's very, very impressive. Pete, we should go and steal it, bring it back here and set it up. What do you reckon?
Shove it in your satchel, you know.
I don't know why, Steve. It's probably only just as efficient as yours.
It might be a slight upgrade.
Have you seen the discone in America that you can just go up and plug your radio into?
No. Was it an old?
It's a military thing. It's like at a base, and I think you might have to ask for like the keys, but it's got a SO239, and you can plug your radio into a passive discone.
If it's a discone, it'd be fairly broad-banded. It wouldn't have all that much gain, but it would certainly cover a lot of frequencies.
It's the Titan Missile Museum.
Do you mean to tell me you connect your radio to that and a missile comes for you? It sounds a bit too much like Moscow at the moment, doesn't it? Sorry, that was a bad joke. Black humour. Oh, dear.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised it's being heard here during the day, Chris, on 40 metres. When you were talking about if it's possible, I was thinking about Pete's friend, the Flying Scotsman, who seems to be able to put in a good signal on 40 metres in the afternoons before sunset. If he can do it with his 5-element step IR, I think it's possible with half a megawatt and a curtain array.
Well, yes. I'm just surprised that they'd put that much power into a program that's basically just half an hour of news in French.
Could you imagine the power bill?
Yes. I mean, Dave up in Neilborough was telling me that the most expensive single element of running his shortwave station is the power bill. So spread on the ground over about several hundred yards, there's every imaginable type of second-hand solar panel.
Of course.
Feeding into a battery storage system, which is also second-hand. He's a great one for picking up stuff cheap at second-hand swap meets, or hovering around people's, their what they put out for hard rubbish. And he's found the most extraordinary number of cast-off solar panels. I mean, even when we went to Deal Island, he had one that was actually on a piece of perspex that you could roll up. I was surprised that such things existed. We were able to, run it through an inverter in the bright sunny days and charge all of our lithium batteries off that thing. So that technology is certainly advancing apace. But yeah, where Dave is, he's at the end of a long line of 240 volt, and power is always a problem, and it's very expensive there compared to Melbourne too, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's 22 minutes past midnight. Perhaps we should start wrapping up before my wife starts knocking on the door and saying, "Where are you?"
Got one quick thing to add. So the DRM that they're testing,
yes,
it's part of a project. So they're embedding images and documents into the stream, which you can do, but then they're setting up receivers that will. It says, I'm reading translated from French. It says, picks up the signal, will store the data, and then rebroadcast it using Wi-Fi for places who don't have internet. So they're going to put news articles and things into the DRM, and then they're building software and sounds like hardware, so that it points out refugee camps or places without internet, so they can get access to, because someone will have a phone. It's not that rare for people to have phones, and they'll be able to, read the news and things with just a short DRM broadcast.
Yeah, well, I took some notes when I was receiving it on 7205, and these are the notes that I got. TDF, as you say, they were using mode B of DRM, a 10 kilohertz wide channel of close-spaced carriers, 16 QAM, 16 MSC, and a transfer rate of 8.08 kilobytes per second. The resultant audio stream is sampled at 12 kilohertz 16-bit and appears to be mono, and I received it via Strathbogie 1. Does that line up with what you have, Matt?
I don't have that much information. Does the receiver in Kiwi Audio tell you about the other data streams? If you use a program like Dream, which I think is what the Kiwi SDR software is based off, the DRM part, it will tell you the bit rate of the audio, and it will tell you if anything else has been embedded into the signal.
I couldn't see anything else embedded. I can only suggest give it a try. 7205 is the medium frequency, so it goes from 7.2 to 7.21 as a broad stream. On the day that I was receiving it, there was very little fade. That was the incredible thing. So I was assuming that it had been beamed in a very, very narrow beam to minimise multipath, perhaps with some altitude control as well. But every day, including Sundays, they transmit from 1 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Melbourne time, and you can pick them up on the Strathbogie Web SDR, I think is the best I found. But I didn't see any evidence of any other information apart from audio, whether that's a function of the limitations of the web SDRs, or whether it's an actual, what was going on at the time just didn't include images or text. I don't know. I did see that when you were receiving it, there was a running title across the top of the page with just saying TDF Radio France, and then, you know, just the name of the station. But the audio was not particularly impressive. I don't know whether the web SDRs have a subpar decoder, or their software is not up to it, but it was kind of like D-Star, sort of washy, swishy would be the best description.
That bad, eh?
Well, that would be interesting. Yeah, I was wondering that. I was hoping you could tell me what the data rate of the audio was. If the data rate was bad, then it might have been because they were using a bunch of that data to transfer other stuff in the background.
I'll just see. I think Radio Nederland 2026 7205. Here's an example of it. Just hang on.
Le seul nom qui a filtré. Selon le Financial Times, ce fonds au capital américain émirien se serait positionné pour acquérir tout ou partie des 37% de parts détenues par la famille industrielle Duval, famille qui n'a jamais officiellement communiqué sur sa volonté de revoir à la baisse sa participation. La potentielle entrée d'Orient CMC au sein des Ramettes pose plusieurs questions.
Just as an example, that was recorded on the 13th of June, Maddie.
Sounds better than Dumpstar.
Well, that's not saying much.
What's it like with music?
I don't know whether there's any music on this. I'll just see. Hang on.
Mais il était déjà voir. MLS n'est pas. Et cela, ça compte aussi. L'influenceur suivre les matchs et commenter, oui ou non. Le football peut sauver la coupe. Pourcent de part.
I can't find. I don't think there was any music in what I recorded. Back to you.
Is it suitable for music?
From memory, I did hear it playing music, but it sounded muddy. It sounded intermodulated. There wasn't definition in the orchestral rendition, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to music on any of the digital modes that we're familiar with, it's almost impossible. It's like if you try to listen to music
Yeah.
on D-Star, Fusion or P25 or DMR, it's atrocious.
Yeah.
Yes, we've borne that out with our own testing, like when Greg QSL was playing the Seinfeld theme song.
That's right.
I did look. This is giving secrets away, but at one stage, now what was it? It would have been. I forget what the circumstances were, but somebody experimentally transmitted to me a symphony orchestra on D-Star, and what came out of my loudspeaker sounded like a single saxophone playing the same thing.
A single saxophone?
Yes, it had sort of conflated the entire orchestra into one instrument or one set of frequencies. Very, very strange. Not terribly good.
The advantage of DRM is that you get to pick your audio codec, and if you want to optimize for voice or for music, or if you want to go a wide bandwidth and but a high QAM and low error, or the other way around. So you can make it okay for music, but it's the trade-off, right? If you make it good for music, or you can make it so for music but let more people hear it because you put more error correction in it and make it easier to receive. So yeah, it's better. It's much better than these.
Yeah.
Tell you that.
Well, I suppose somebody at Radio France has done a costing of how much it would cost them to launch a satellite to do what they're doing with this system, and they've just found that it's too expensive and they're prepared to pay the power bill.
Probably trying to find an excuse to keep all those antennas and amplifiers operational.
I don't know what's behind it. Although French tends to be spoken by a lot of people in the Middle East, and if they're in refugee places, that would be kind of logical, wouldn't it? Anyway, look, it's 12:32 now. I really have to start wrapping up. Thank you, people, all for your company, and the conversation almost invariably is quite stimulating, so thank you for that also. And we'll see you in 23 hours.
Thank you for the content earlier, Chris. I do enjoy your archives, and
they're not my archives, but
you
takes...
have a nice collection of very interesting history, and I do enjoy listening to it, Chris. So thank you for doing that and bringing it back to air again. I do look forward to it and enjoy it very much.
Good.
Amen to that, and I second that. Good night, Steve. Good night, Matt. Good night, Chris. Thank you for the cross-banding. And over to you, Matty.
Oh, the same thing too. And I managed to catch just the start of the Titanic recording, and that was fantastic and horrible and fantastic. So I do appreciate those things as well.
If you want to listen to the whole thing, Maddie, I put it up on the YouTube channel. Well, I don't think I've put that one up yet. Yes, I have. That was the last one I put up. I also want to do a bit of an expanded thing on 3CR at some stage, now that they're coming up on the 3rd of July, very close. That'll be the day of their official opening 50 years ago, and I was there. So, and I have tapes of it, so that would make an interesting evening. Thank you for being there, Steve, Peter, Harry 3HFX, if you're still there, and we'll catch you in 23 hours, or at least some of you, hopefully, and 3ARD.
It's so entertaining, as I keep on saying, and everybody else is confirming it, Chris.
Okay. It's an look, I think Tony, having been the first to really push the cross-banding, and Dave carrying on with it through the 80s and 90s, really it's not that difficult to implement, and it does tend to lubricate the course of conversation to have the duplex aspect. Anyway, with that, all the best. This is VK3AML now closing on 147.475, and as always, I'll listen just to make it legal on 147.475 before pulling the big switch finally. Thanks, fellas. VK3AML clear.